It's Super Bowl week in Las Vegas. With palpable excitement in the air, there's no place I'd rather be. I bought tickets because the team I grew up rooting for is playing in the big game in the same city I'm currently living in. I can't wait. There are multiple fun events the whole week, and I'm going all out as well. The morning after playing a high-stakes session that you'll see in a future episode, I get a text from Chris Johnson, who I met the day before. He organizes the biggest cash games in Vegas that take place in the historic Bobby's Room inside Bellagio. Chris gives me an invitation to play 100-100 no limit right as it starts. This is a reserved game, and it's a huge privilege to be allowed in when it begins at 10 a.m. because that's when it's best, with lots of business guys in the lineup. As the day progresses, usually more and more pros filter in. I'm glad that I happened to be awake at 8:30 in the morning to receive the text, but I won't be able to play quite as long as I'd like because I have a Poker Go tournament that I have scheduled later on in the day. The drive to Bellagio is a bit more ornate than usual, with big TV stages built in front of the fountains. I make my way to the poker room and buy in for $15,000. As I get chips, I couldn't be more pumped up to play. I've only played one other time in a high stakes game in Bobby's Room, which has now been renamed Legends Room. Even some of the Bellagio staff is surprised to see me taking a shot.
Are you in here?
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right.
What's up, guys? The session begins at 10:07. We're playing 100-100 with a $100 big blind ante. To generate a little more action, the 7 deuce game is on, and there are $300 bomb pots every half hour, with time and pre-tips taken out of the pot. Just 4 minutes in, we're dealt 7 deuce suited in the cutoff. Under the gun raises to 300. A lot of times, people 3-bet 7 deuce whenever they get it, but we're up against the under the gun pre-flop raiser's narrow range. There's a higher than normal chance of getting 4-bet if we take that approach. Then we'll have to fold. Rather than going that route, I call with plans of trying to steal this post flop if there's a good opportunity. The big blind calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop in position. The dealer puts out 10-9-7 rainbow. We've got bottom pair and a backdoor flush draw. It's not bad for us, especially because a flop with a lot of middling cards is going to crush our pre-flop calling range. The big blind checks. Under the gun checks, which I doubt he'd do with 2 pair or better on a coordinated board when he has multiple opponents. I bet 600, hoping that we're up against some hands that won't want to continue so that we can win the pot and an extra $300 from each player. That won't be happening. The big blind calls. Under the gun calls as well. The turn is the deuce of hearts. We drill 2 pair in the sneakiest of ways. We almost definitely have the best hand after we didn't get check raised on the flop. Checks to us once again. The opponents likely have draws of some sort, perhaps combo draws. We need to start trying to pile in money because there aren't a lot of good rivers for us. I bet 2,200 for value. The big blind is trying to determine whether or not he should stick around. Ultimately, he makes the call. It's now under the gun's turn to make a decision. There's been plenty of action in front of him, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him fold. He seems to have other plans as he grabs a big stack of yellow 1K chips, cuts them out, then reaches for a couple of black chips to add to it, making a 5-figure check raise to 10,200. We're not easing into the session at all. Right away, we're getting into a wild situation all because the 7 deuce game is on. We've only got 14,000 total in our stack, with 2,200 of it already in the middle of the felt. I mentioned earlier that I ruled out the under the gun player having 2 pair or better on the flop, particularly after he didn't check raise us at that point. I doubt the deuce on the turn helped him unless he has a hand like ace-jack or jack-9 of hearts that he's making a move with after possibly picking up a flush draw. Either way, I don't see how he could have better than 1 pair. We're putting all of our chips to use immediately. Come on. I rip it. The big blind's caught in the middle. He quickly folds after putting his $2,200 call in earlier. Under the gun isn't snap calling, even though it's only 3,800 more. After realizing it's just a small amount on top, he figures he's probably behind, but why not gamble as he flicks in a calling chip. We're in an all-in pot, well over $30,000 to start the day. All right, this is gonna be a big one.
1 time or 2 times?
It's up to you. All right. We're playing for an absurd amount of money, and we're seeing 2 rivers, not being entirely sure if we've got the lead or what we need to fade since the opponent doesn't flip his cards over for us to have a proper sweat. The first river is the deuce of clubs, giving us a backdoor full house. We've got to have half the pot locked up because the opponent chose to run it twice after seeing that we had 2 pair. If he had a set on the turn, he could have told us that we were drawing dead and only needed to run it once. This is a key run out to win because not only do we lock up half the pot, the first run out determines whether or not the other players at the table have to pay the $300 penalty to us for winning with 7 deuce. The second river is the 10 of diamonds pairing the board and counterfeiting our 2 pair. The opponent snap turns over pocket jacks. He sucks out on us to win the second run out and half the pot. It's brutal to not win an additional $16,500, but I'm happy that our assessment of the situation on the flop and turn allowed us to get our money in good. We still chop up a few thousand that the big blind put into the pot, and we get an additional $300 from every player at the table for winning the first run out with 7 deuce. Altogether, we profit $3,700. It's still a great start. Here we're dealt 9-7 suited in the cutoff. The player in middle position raises to 300. 9-7 suited is towards the bottom of my range, but with no rake and a big blind ante, calling or occasionally 3-betting are both reasonable options. I call, the big blind also calls, we're going 3 ways to the flop in position, it comes 8-6-5 rainbow, we flop the nuts with 2 opponents. The big blind checks, I'm rooting for a big bet from the pre-flop aggressor, he's not willing to cooperate, he checks, we've got to take matters into our own hands, I bet 700. The big blind is our best candidate for someone who might have connected with this board enough to call or raise. Not this time though. He folds, the middle position player folds quickly as well. We're not able to get paid. Still, it's always fun to flop a big hand like that, especially in a nosebleed game. In this one, we're dealt 5-4 suited in the cutoff. It's another hand that's towards the bottom of our range, but we're happy to play almost all suited connectors from late position. I raised to 300. The small blind is a pretty active player named Stu who helps organize the game. He 3-bets to 1300. We have a hand with lots of potential that should be in its own lane. I call for 1,000 more to see if we can make a hand or possibly steal the pot if there's a good opportunity. The flop comes King Jack 4 with 2 hearts and a diamond. We've got bottom pair but no backdoor draws. The small blind has a massive range advantage with 2 Broadway cards out there after 3-betting pre-flop. When that's the case, we expect to see a lot of small bet sizings like 20% and 1/3 pot. The small blind bets at 1100. We're not folding to a small bet and we've got a pair and what should be a live second card. We're supposed to be calling the majority of the time while mixing in some raises to represent a set of 4s because that's one of the very few hands that we'd be raising with for value on this flop. I call to see the turn. We're heads up in a large pot. The turn is the Queen of Spades. It's another Broadway card that doesn't help us. The small blind slows down and checks, like I imagine he would with plenty of 1-pair combos that he's planning to call a bet with, like Ace-Queen, and even most of the time with Ace-King combos. We likely don't have the best hand, but we've got a pure check back. That's what we do to realize any small amount of equity that we might have, in case the opponent has a small Ace-X suited type of hand that we're beating. The river is another Queen. It's a pretty bad card because it certainly felt like we were up against a second pair type of holding on the turn that has now improved to trips. The small blind bets 2600. We're caught at the very bottom of our range. We need to abort. I fold.
Like if you went high over there, you should swap it yourself.
Right.
7 deuce. God damn it.
The opponent has 7 deuce of hearts. He flopped a flush draw that missed. We had the winning hand, but we weren't able to make the call. Instead, we lose the pot and an additional 300. For the first time today, we're down 1,000. Minutes later, we're dealt 9-8 suited in the big blind. The button raises to 300. We're happy to see a flop with this hand, although 3-betting is a good option as well. I call for 200 more. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes 8-6-3 with 2 hearts. We've got top pair with a flush draw. I check. I'm loving it though. The button quickly bets 300. I'm more than happy to stick around for that amount. I call. The turn is another 3 pairing the low card on the board. I check, expecting to see a lot of checks from the opponent. He's not a giver-upper. He continues firing, this time for 800, representing at least top pair. Just like Ashley Simpson's career after her appearance on SNL, we're not going anywhere. I call with a 1K chip. The river is the 10 of diamonds. We get downgraded to second pair. It's not what we were hoping for. I check, with intentions of calling anything less than a pot-sized bet after all the major draws have missed. The button snap checks back. It's a good sign. We reveal our pair of 8s. It's the best hand. The opponent doesn't show what he double-barreled with. We've got the winner, and with this pot being pushed towards us, we're back in Profitville. Just not by much. We're only up 1,500. In this game, that's not a lot. A few hands go by when we're dealt 7 deuce of spades under the gun. I raise to 300. No one has a hand that they can get involved with. Everyone folds, which is the outcome that I was hoping to see. We get the blinds and the ante, plus 300 from 6 other players at the table. Now we're up 3,000 on the session. After a dealer change, we pick up Jack 5 offsuit under the gun in a 7-handed bomb pot. After each player puts in 300 pre-flop, we go straight to a flop. The dealer puts out Jack 8 deuce with 2 hearts. We've got top pair, but a terrible kicker. It checks to us. This is a tricky hand to play when 7 people see a flop. Top pair may or may not be best. If it is, I don't want to allow other players an opportunity to see a free card. I bet 600 to hopefully win this without any major resistance. The hijack is Stu. He bluffed his way into a win against us not long ago with 7 deuce. Stu's being difficult, and he raises to 1700, putting us in a pickle. We have removal to 2 pair and set combos, making it less likely that the opponent's raising for value. This is a spot that the hijack might be over bluffing since there are so many possible drawing hands. Not only are there a ton of flush draw combos, there are also tons of straight draws that the hijack could be semi-bluffing with, like 9-7, 10-7, 10-9, Queen-9, and Queen-10. The hijack could also have some overpairs or top pairs that he's raising with to clear out the field and possibly see where he's at, but his 1-pair hands really won't want to see any additional aggression. The problem is that if we think there's a good chance he's bluffing, we don't know what cards that we'll need to fade on the turn and river to retain the lead, if we currently have it at all. Folding is the recommended strategy because that's the simplest and easiest, but I go with my gut and get creative like Stu's son Tommy Pickles with a re-raise to 4,500, representing sets and 2-pair combinations. This should fold out all the opponent's straight draw combos, it might get him to fold some 1-pair hands that are beating us, and it should fold out some of the opponent's weaker flush draws that have a lot of equity. I'd expect the hijack to 4-bet rip it with sets, Jack 8, and Jack deuce. The opponent has a question. This question can often be pretty telling. A lot of the time, players who are on a draw in particular are interested in knowing stack sizes so that they can figure out implied odds if they're able to hit their hand. In this case, if the opponent happens to have a flush draw, I've got another 12,800 in my stack that the hijack could think that I'd be willing to get in there if he just calls the 4,500 and drills a heart. After considering his options for about 45 seconds, the hijack only calls, which indicates to me that we're up against a better 1-pair hand that the opponent isn't super confident in, or we're up against a flush draw that we're ahead of at the moment. The turn is the 3 of diamonds putting a second flush draw on the board, but other than that, it's a blank. We've got slightly more than a pot-sized bet left in our stack. We've narrowed down the opponent's range into 2 categories. The first category is 1-pair hands that we're losing to that the opponent would have an extremely difficult time calling a shove with, like overpairs and ace-jack type of hands. The other category consists of strong draws that we're currently beating but have a ton of outs against us. If our assessment is correct, the hijack is going to absolutely hate facing extra pressure if his hands fall into either of those categories, and we're going to put on the maximum amount of pressure. We bet all $12,800 and we don't get snap called, which is good because there was still a tiny possibility that the opponent was slow playing a set, although it was heavily discounted. The interesting thing right now is that I'm not even sure if we're bluffing or jamming for value, but it doesn't really matter since it's incredibly difficult for the opponent to call with an overpair. If he was playing pocket aces face up, I'd jam anyway, expecting a fold a high percentage of the time. If he was playing ace-10 of hearts face up, I'd also jam anyway, not really minding a call or fold. Stu clearly has a very tough decision. After exactly 1 minute, the hijack makes the call, which I didn't want to see because he either has us beat or he's going to have a million outs. Now we just need to decide how many times we want to run it.
I'm probably not in great shape here.
I have no pair.
Oh, okay. It's up to you.
I flip over our pair. We've already been told that right now it's the best hand, but surely that might change. A lot of guys prefer not to show their cards until they absolutely have to, but Stu is cool enough to show for the vlog that he made the call with ace-4 of hearts. He flopped the flush draw and turned a wheel draw to go with it. If he hits an ace, he'll win as well. Even though running it twice earlier in the session caused me to lose 5 figures, we agree to run it twice this time with hopefully a different outcome. This is an enormous sweat. We're playing almost a $40,000 pot. It's the biggest one that I've ever played at Bellagio, just barely beating the previous biggest one that I played with 7 deuce less than an hour and a half ago. The first river is the king of clubs. We lock up over $18,000 and guarantee that we'll end the hand with more than we started with since it was a bomb pot with lots of extra money in at the start. We're free rolling the other half of the pot. We've got a second opportunity to do what we weren't able to accomplish earlier, which is scoop a gigantic all-in. There are a lot of cards that'll cause us to split the pot. But the 9 of clubs isn't one of them. Somehow we get the money in good with just one pair and no kicker. We hold on both runouts to get the victory in the biggest pot that I've ever played at Bellagio. It doesn't get more exciting than this. This is double wow exciting.
Wow. Wow.
We get a count of our chips just to make sure the pot's right. I can still feel the adrenaline pumping through my body. I've got 100% of myself in this session, so winning a pot that big feels amazing. I made the largest purchase of my life outside of a house or car with those Super Bowl tickets, so this goes a long way in paying for those. We're currently up over 20,000 on the session, with a few more hours to play before the celebrity tournament later on. Next we've got 7 deuce of hearts in the small blind. The hijack raises to 400. The button calls. I call to see if we can win one more time to get another bonus. The big blind calls as well. We're going 4 ways to the flop. The dealer puts out King Jack 9 with 2 hearts. We've got a flush draw, but that's it. I check. The opponents may not have much. They all check as well. The turn is the 9 of diamonds pairing the board and putting another flush draw out there. I'm going to see if we can steal this one with the semi-bluff. I bet 1100. The opponent who's our biggest concern is the big blind because he'll have plenty of trip 9 combos and other strong hands, while the other 2 opponents behind him both checked on the flop as the initial pre-flop raiser and the last person to act, so they're not going to have big hands very often. The big blind calls, which I didn't want to see. The hijack considers putting in chips, then he folds. The button folds quickly. It's down to heads up. We're probably up against a top pair type of hand or a diamond draw of some sort. The river is the 10 of diamonds, putting 4 to the straight on board and completing the backdoor flush draw. There are too many hands that we could be up against that improved. I check. The big blind benefits from the river card, but he still doesn't feel good enough about betting it. He checks back King Queen offsuit, which is a straight. We don't win. I wish that I would have 3-bet the 7 deuce pre-flop because we probably would have ended the hand with a couple thousand more than we started with. Instead, I kind of lose the maximum. 2 hours into the session, we pick up pocket deuces in the cutoff. We're going to be playing all of our pocket pairs from this position. I raised to 300. The big blind's the only caller. He's the opponent that we chopped the monster pot with to start the day. We're heads up in position. The flop comes King 8 deuce with 2 diamonds. We've got bottom set. The big blind checks. King high flops will typically be better for us, and this one is certainly best for us. I make a small bet of 300. The opponent has been check raising small bets at a high frequency. I'm hoping that that's what he does in this case too. The big blind doesn't let us down. He check raises to 1100. This is awesome. He would have 3-bet pre-flop with pocket king, so we can rule out him having that hand. The only hand that he'll have that realistically beats us is a set of 8s. I call for 800 more in order to keep the opponent's bluffs in. I'll raise on the turn if we can get a clean one. The dealer puts out the 5 of spades. It's a terrific card that's a total blank other than the fact that another flush draw is out there. The big blind goes with an oddly small sizing of 1200. It's really bizarre, as if he's trying to get to the river cheaply with top pair or a draw. It's time to lay down the law. I raised to 4600. The big blind doesn't seem to be contemplating a fold. He may not believe that we're as strong as we are after we didn't re-raise on the flop. The big blind calls. He could reasonably have top pair, either flush draw or 2 pair. I'd love to see the 3 of clubs one time. The dealer puts out the 7 of diamonds, completing the most obvious flush draw and allowing some unlikely straights to get there as well. The really unfortunate aspect of this hand is that I'll almost never have a flush after raising on the turn because most of the time with diamonds, I'll gladly call a small bet rather than raise in order to see if we can get there on the river. The big blind may have realized that my range is capped as he makes a large bet of 10,200. He's clearly representing a flush, but it's possible he's turning a backdoor spade draw into a bluff or another combo containing just the ace of diamonds. This is a strange hand. I don't like it. Feels like we're beat, but I'm not good enough to fold a set. I call, knowing it's likely we're beat before even seeing the cards.
Flush is good. Yeah, nice hand, nice hand.
The opponent has King Queen of diamonds. He flopped top pair in a flush draw, then rivered the diamond that he was looking for harder than Leonardo DiCaprio. Nearly all of the $20,000 profit we had in front of us vanishes after I pay the opponent off. It's a tough hand to mentally recover from, but the stakes are too high to let it affect me much. I need to keep my head in the game to stay sharp, otherwise it could lead to me losing a lot more than that. Just a few hands later, we're dealt King Jack suited under the gun. There's not much I want more right now than an opportunity to get involved in a pot and start winning again. I raised to 300. The opponents all smell blood in the water. A player in middle position, the button, and the small blind all call, we're going 4 ways to the flop. The dealer puts out King 9-3 rainbow, we've got top pair with an OK kicker. The small blind checks, again, King high flop should ordinarily be better for us as the pre-flop aggressor. I bet 800 to protect our equity. That amount isn't enough to get the job done. The middle position player calls, the button is the only one who doesn't like his hand, he folds, the small blind would like to see at least one more card, he calls, it's down to 3 of us. The turn is the ace of hearts putting a flush draw out there and reducing the strength of our hand, but it's not all that likely that either opponent will have an ace after only calling our pre-flop raise and also calling our flop bet. Small blind checks, the ace would be a good card for us to bluff if it felt like we needed to, because we're the only person who will have pocket aces or ace king in their range, but our hand doesn't need to bluff. I check so that we can hopefully get to showdown. The middle position player knows that the ace isn't going to be great for him most of the time, he checks back. I put the opponents on straight draws mostly. The river is another 3, it's not too concerning. The small blind checks, I don't think either opponent will have a hand strong enough to call a bet. Our kicker no longer even plays, so the best chance that we have at making any additional money is by giving the last player to act an opportunity to turn his hand into a bluff. I check, the middle position player checks immediately. I figure a pair of kings is best, so I flip it over right away rather than force the small blind to show first. Neither opponent can beat us. The small blind and middle position player don't show us their cards as they both muck face down. It's not a huge pot considering we've already played 3 over $30,000 today, but it's a significant one to improve morale and boost confidence. We're back up 3,500 in today's session. We could still end with a 20k plus win if we're able to take down another all-in pot or several smaller ones. We pick up ace-king offsuit in the hijack. I raised to 300. We've sort of been constantly involved in pots since we sat down without getting a break. It at least makes for a fun session. The cutoff makes things more exciting as he puts in a big 3-bet to 1,200. Against a normal 3x size 3-bet, we're supposed to split between calling and 4-betting. Because this is a larger sizing and because this is the first time I've seen this particular opponent 3-bet all day, I call for 900 more. We're heads up out of position against a player who's on the tighter side. The flop comes ace 10-8 rainbow. We very likely have the best hand with top. I check because the opponent has the range advantage, although he probably doesn't have us beat in this instance. He checks back, indicating that he might have a hand like kings, queens, jacks, or an ace-5 suited type of hand. The turn is the queen of diamonds. It's probably the worst card in the deck because, as I already mentioned, we could be up against queens, but there's also a possibility that the opponent could have ace-queen as well. I check, the cutoff is content to gather chips and make nearly a pot-sized bet of 2,600. I already want to fold, but our hand is majorly under-repped, and we still have a draw to the nuts, plus there's always some chance we could be up against 7-deuce. I call, I'm not exactly fist-pumping though. The river is the 7 of hearts. It's a blank since we're not in Texas and I don't have to worry about the opponent having 9-6. I check, really wanting to see a check back. We don't see one. The opponent goes with a somewhat small sizing compared to his turn bet. He wagers 3,000. Theoretically, ace-king offsuit is supposed to be a call the majority of the time after playing the hand this way. This may be surprising to some, but we can also mix in check raising about 15% of the time. Ace-king is supposed to fold only 25% of the time. Knowing what we know about our opponent, especially after seeing him check back a straight against us previously, I'd recommend folding 100% of the time, because it's just way too likely that we're up against queens or ace-queen. I'm having a hard time letting go after under-repping the hand, and also after losing to a rivered flush when we had the set less than 15 minutes ago. The poker gods wouldn't be cruel enough to let our opponent drill another perfect card on us so soon in another big pot, would he? I guess we'll have to find out.
Call. 3 ladies.
Yeah, so I was worried about. Listen.
The opponent does a great job to make the maximum from me. It's one more painful loss that I should have gotten away from. This brings us to the low point on the day. It's been a $25,000 swing from our peak, and we had over $36,000 in front of us. Now we've got $11,500, and we're stuck $3,500 on the day. We lose a few more small pots to be stuck over $5,000 before picking up 9-5 suited in the small blind. The button raises to 300. The button is Cliff Josephy, aka Johnny Backs. He has over $8 million in live tournament earnings with 2 gold bracelets and his best live cash coming when he got 3rd in the 2016 main event for $3.5 million. Since I don't have a particularly aggressive opponent on my left and the small blind is the same amount as the big blind, I call for only 200 more. This call is a little wider than recommended, even though we didn't have to call a large amount to see a flop, and the big blind ante is added in there. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes Queen 8-4 with 2 hearts. We've got a flush draw and some interesting backdoor straight possibilities. I check, the button checks back. The turn is the King of Hearts giving us a flush. There's no reason the Cliff should suspect that we've got a flush or even a flush draw, and a second Broadway card coming out should induce a bet from the button whether he's got anything or not, because that'll ordinarily be a better card for him. I check to allow the opponent an opportunity to bluff or bet with a pair of kings. The button jumps all over it. He makes a pot-sized bet of 800. I definitely wasn't expecting to see a bet that big. Maybe he's got a big draw with the ace of hearts or something. I announce a check raise to 3,000. Cliff folds immediately. He tells me that he had pocket nines, so our sneaky check on the turn earns us an extra 800 that we probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. We're on the comeback trail. The next orbit, we're dealt ace-10 offsuit in the small blind. The cutoff raises to 300. Cliff calls on the button. This should be a fold, but in these games it's important to stretch out the range when opportunities are apparent so that we're more likely to get invited back. We're getting a good price with a decent hand anyway. I call, the big blind calls, we're going 4 ways to the flop. It comes King Queen 5 with 2 spades. We've got a gutter with 1 over. No one's all that excited about the community cards. Everyone checks, which provides us with an opportunity. The turn is the 8 of spades. There are 3 to the flush on board. After seeing lots of passiveness on the flop, I attempt to steal what's in the middle with a bet of 700. This gets the job done. The opponents all fold. We're only down 1,500 now. 2 hands later, we've got ace-7 suited in the cutoff. Cliff raises to 300 in the hijack. We can call or 3-bet. I take the more aggressive approach, and I 3-bet to 900. This gives us the opportunity to win the pot right now, or hopefully isolate the opponent and play a bigger pot in position with a hand that'll do well on plenty of flops. The hijack calls, we're heads up. The flop comes Queen 8-5 with 2 diamonds. We've got a flush draw, 1 over, and a backdoor straight draw. The hijack checks. We'd be c-betting this a lot of the time, even if we had different suits. I bet 1100 to win it now or build the pot for when the deck decides to make up for us losing to the diamond flush earlier. Cliff folds. Making a flush won't be necessary. It's nice to win over $1,000 with only ace high. We were up over 20k, then down 5k. Now we're almost back to even, just not quite there yet. We're $350 away. The very next hand, we win a pot with pocket deuces after raising pre-flop, not connecting with the flop, and taking it down with the c-bet. This win gets us all the way back over the even mark. I'm really enjoying playing. I've got a decent edge in the game based on who's in the lineup. With about 2 more hours remaining before I have to leave, I should have a good chance at still booking a solid winning session. Well, we don't quite get the opportunity. After playing another orbit, I get tapped to be removed from the game in order to make room for one of the business guys who showed up. It's unfortunate when this type of thing happens. That doesn't happen in public games, but I completely understand the situation and feel lucky to have been able to play in Bobby's room at all today with this group. So I rack up, but that's not even close to the end of poker for us today. Played for 3 hours today. That was about the wildest break-even session that I could imagine. I played 3 pots over 30,000 and I broke even on them because we split that one. And yeah, I think I was up 21,000 at the high point after that Jack 5 hand, which was just a massive all-in. And then lost 2 really big hands in a row, pretty much. The set of deuces one was rough, and then I should have been able to get away from that ace-king hand, but made the call and lost a good chunk there and was stuck 5k, but won some small and medium pots, then was even, which was great, but I got tapped to be replaced. They wanted to get someone else in the game, and I was going to leave in about 2 hours anyway, so I was kind of the choice to be removed, to have someone else come in, and I'm just thankful for any time I can get in that game, although I was on the comeback trail and I would have loved to have booked a winning session and played for a little longer, but I'm just grateful for any time that I get in that game because they don't have to let me in, and it was just nice to get the invite and to show you guys what it's like to play in Bobby's room, which is just a historical room with basically all the legends have played in there. And yeah, now I've got a couple hours to kill before the celebrity poker showdown at the Poker Go studio. So that'll be pretty awesome. Might hop into a small stakes game, or might just grab some food. We're playing some more cash. I buy into 510 for the max, which is 2,500. Who needs food anyway? I'm ready to grind and book a win. I'm down a few hundred when we pick up pocket queens in the small blind. The hijack limps in for 10. The button raises to 40. We've got the third best hand in poker. I 3-bet to 180. If we win this pre-flop, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. The hijack folds. The button has a hand that he'd like to see a flop with from in position. He calls. We're heads up in a large pot for these stakes. The flop comes 10-8-4 with 2 clubs. Since we didn't get 4-bet pre-flop, we don't have to worry much about being up against pocket aces or pocket kings. The opponent could have sets, but those are hard to hit. The main hands that I want to get value out of that I think are likely to be in the opponent's range are hands like pocket jacks, top pair holdings, and flush draws. We're currently beating all those hands, but there will be tons of bad cards that will either cause us to lose the lead or will scare the opponent from calling on future streets. For example, if the opponent has ace-10 or pocket jacks, he won't want to see any king, queen, or club come out. I go for an overbet of 500 to try to get as much in now as possible. It really forces the opponent to commit with hands that we're dominating or at least have a small lead against. If the opponent happens to have a set, we're likely going to get stacked anyway with an overpair on this board. The button is thinking about this one for a while. It really feels like he has jacks. Eventually, the opponent jams for 1845 effective, which is sort of what I was hoping for. He has us covered, and my mind is already made up.
Okay, he's all in, he calls. Here we go, guys.
The opponent hasn't turned over his cards yet. There was no discussion of running it twice, so we're only running it once in a pot over $4,000, and we don't know what cards we need to avoid. I'm really just hoping for the queen of diamonds to come out. The turn is the 4 of clubs. It's not good if we were up against a flush draw. We at least have the queen of clubs in case we're up against a smaller flush though. The river is the king of spades, which also isn't good if we're up against king 10. The opponent turns over king 9 of clubs. We got it in as a slight favorite at 55%, but the button immediately smashes the club draw on the turn. Then just to rub it in, he pairs his king to show that he's capable of beating me in diverse ways. I played well over $100,000 worth of pots in the high stakes game and somehow managed to finish that portion of the session within 2 figures of what I started with. But after playing only a short time in 510, I lose 2,500. It's time to head to the Poker Go studio for the Celebrity Poker Tour event that I've been looking forward to playing for a long time. It's an invitational free roll with $50,000 in the prize pool. There are all kinds of celebrities, professional football and baseball players, a few fighters, chess players, and multiple other cool people. It's a really unique mix, and the action's live streamed on YouTube. The actual poker is very interesting. Everyone starts with 100,000 in chips, plus an add-on for 100,000 more that you can use at any time. It's really fun to watch some of these other guys play. The WPT even finds a new ambassador.
Time, bitch.
Yes, exactly. We make it pretty deep in the tournament. There were over 70 entries. The top 9 make the money with 20,000 for first. We get the stack up over 400,000. The structure's a quick one with blinds drastically increasing every 15 minutes. There's no time to relax. With 19 players left, I get it all in pre-flop with king-queen offsuit. 2 players call my shove. If I'm able to win this pot, I'll triple up and have one of the bigger stacks remaining. The flop comes 5-4-3 with 2 hearts. It's not looking good. The big blind has less than 1 big blind in his stack. He gets it all in, so there's no more action. The cards get flipped over. We're up against 5-3 and 9-8 offsuit. It's not a good situation for us. We're up against 2 pair. We need runner. The turn is another 5, giving the opponent in the big blind a full house and ending it. The river is another 4, but it doesn't matter. I'm not able to make the money, but I still had an awesome time hanging out with friends and meeting tons of interesting people like Calais Campbell, who impressed me with his poker skills the most out of everyone else that I played with. It's almost time for the Super Bowl, but I have my brother and a handful of friends in town. We see a comedy show at MGM Garden Arena with Bobby Lee, Shane Gillis, Tom Segura, and Bert Kreischer all performing. This has been the most fun week that I've had in a long time. It's all leading up to the event that I'm looking forward to even more though. I've been a Niners fan my whole life. This is a picture of me when I was 11, going to my first game at Candlestick, seeing Steve Young in his last season with my older brother and my dad. I've gone to several more games since then with my brother and also with the rest of our family. Some of my favorite memories that I have in life are rooting for the team with the people I'm closest to, so this Super Bowl means a lot. Even though the tickets are ridiculously priced, I went for it knowing that it could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I bought tickets for me, my brother, and my girlfriend who's 8.5 months pregnant with our son. We show up hours before the game to soak everything in and get the most out of the experience. As game time approaches, the energy in the stadium is absolutely insane. I've never had the opportunity to even go to an NFL playoff game before, so this is unlike anything that I've ever seen. We're sitting in the third deck. Still, almost all the exciting plays happen on our side of the field. I'm screaming and yelling at the top of my lungs the entire time. I'll certainly remember this play for the rest of my life, with McCaffrey scoring a wild 21-yard touchdown to extend the lead to 10. No one knows better than Niners fans that you can't count Patrick Mahomes out though, even with a big lead. It's tough to watch as the Chiefs ultimately celebrate a walk-off win, scoring a touchdown right at the end of overtime. The game mirrors the cash game session for the week. We were up big at one point, pretty much ended dead even at the conclusion of regulation. Then, during extended play, we lost with everything at stake. The Niners are now 0-3 in Super Bowls that I'm old enough to remember. Hopefully someday they'll win another one in my lifetime that I can watch with my family. At least I was able to witness one of the most exciting Super Bowls of all time. I was able to see one of the greatest quarterbacks in the prime of his career, and I'm able to check an item off the bucket list that I made when I was in my early 20s. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Helps out the channel a ton. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'm happy to get back to you. I put this episode out a little bit out of order. So I have like 9 other videos in the pipeline, and including some huge wins and tournaments and stuff. So I can't wait to share those with you. Be on the lookout for those. But I also included a lot of hands in this one that maybe wouldn't have made it if it was in a smaller stakes game, but they're just kind of more common situations, and I think it's good to put those in every once in a while, and it makes sense to do it when I'm playing massive stakes in Bobby's room, because every hand that takes place in that room when you're playing that big ends up being pretty interesting. Got a couple of meetup games coming up. We're doing one April 18th at the Seminole Hard Rock in Hollywood, Florida. That'll be part of the WPT tournament series out there. That's going to be really cool, and I'll have more information in the description box below. And then April 23rd at the Lodge in Austin, Texas, to kick off the Lodge Championship Series. It's our biggest series of the year. If you haven't made it out to the Lodge, that's a bucket list place to go if you're a poker player, and that's the absolute best time of the year to go. Hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you're staying safe. Good luck at the tables, and I'll see you next time.